Natalie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I was obsessed with dinosaurs, and I really thought that spending all day in the hot sun, like dusting off fossils, was my dream. Beyond that, I don't know that I ever really had a specific career in mind. But what I can tell you is up until high school, I'd never imagined being a business owner, never thought about being an entrepreneur. That never crossed my mind. And so I think as a kid, I was just really into science and I was very nerdy, and I kind of leaned in that direction.
That's awesome. And how do you think that connects to what you do today? The science, the nerdy, the paleontology?
Yeah, leaning into that science. I mean, I have not changed very much since I was 5 in regards to my fascination with understanding the world around me and uncovering things that I didn't know before, which, uncovering fossils and very similar to uncovering new data around the brain. I studied neuroscience and psychology at Penn for my undergrad. And even today, as an advocate for independent business, I'm really passionate about understanding the science of self-made success. What does it really look like to be an independent? What does it take to build a sustainable business? Does the psychology say about it? Neuroscience say about it? Sociology say about it? How do we view owning a business from multiple different perspectives? And what are some of the nuggets that we can pull from what we do know about how humans think and how we interact with the world to help us be better business owners? I love that. I live in that space. I geek out in that space. And I will say, folks that know me personally or have been a part of my community or any of the communities that I've built over the years have often told me, like, I really enjoy how nerdy you get with things because then I don't have to. They're like, you'll just tell me the important bits from the neuroscience research that you read. You're on JSTOR. Like, I literally spend time on JSTOR, or I'm hopping to Google Scholar and I'm reading some of these studies, and then I'll just tell you the part that you need to know. And so I think, as I said, I don't know that I've changed all that much since I was 5. I've just sort of redirected that curiosity and that love of science into entrepreneurship, into supporting and advocating for independent businesses. And I think I'll still probably be doing something like this in my 70s. So I don't know that I'll change very much in the future either, in that respect, at least.
I love that. So for those who don't know you, tell us what you do today.
Yes. So I'm Natalie Franke. I am a 2-time author and entrepreneur, but the titles that I'm actually most proud of, 1, I'm a mom of 2, miracle, wonderful little ones. My oldest is 4, my youngest is 1.5. I am a wife to my high school sweetheart. We have been together for almost 2 decades, and we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. And when it comes to my professional life, I am a mama bear for small business. I am a fierce champion of independent work and transforming the way that we work to make it such that people can really pursue their passion and find purpose in their day-to-day life. And that has led me to create communities like the Rising Tide Society, and also serve today as the Chief Evangelist at HoneyBook, which is such a passion. I get to support this incredible community at HoneyBook. And for those who don't know, it's a client flow management platform that essentially helps independent business owners and service-based businesses with everything from pay to pay. So everything from that first inquiry all the way through navigating contracts and invoices and the communication that goes into providing a really extraordinary experience. And so I wear a lot of hats, but at the end of the day, I get to wake up and build a world where I hope, at least in the future, anyone can start and thrive in business ownership. That's the dream. That's the world we're fighting for.
Well, what's coming up for me is how beautifully you just talked about that. You just described what you do. You did it in such a beautiful way. And also for listeners, I'm sure they're thinking this, you have such a beautiful voice, like made for podcasts.
You're very kind. Well, I am launching my first podcast very, very soon. It might even be out by the time this one is out.
Oh my gosh.
I know, I'm so excited. It's called Independent Business. And so it is about the science of self-made success. It's everything we just talked about in podcast form. So I'm excited, but it's something that I've wanted to do for a while. I love listening to podcasts. So this is the year. I don't know if anyone else has felt this. I don't know if you feel this, Lupe, but this is the year where we say yes to the things that we've always wanted to do. but
Mhm.
maybe have been putting off for the wrong reasons, like out of fear or insecurity, or we've let scarcity mindset hold us back or whatever it is. And so for me, this is one of those things where for too many years I said, there's enough podcasts in the world. I really am challenging that this year. And I'm saying, you know what, but I haven't done one. And so
Mhm.
I hope that's encouraging to someone listening
Oh,
to
thank you
this
for
that,
sharing that.
has
Yes.
those dreams too.
Yes. Yes. There's always space. And then you have such a strong community that I think it will be very successful.
It'll be fun to create and also to involve the community in.
Yeah.
That for me is like the heart of the work that I do. I might be the one hosting it, but at the end of the day, they're really the ones driving it, what they need, what's keeping them up at night, what they're struggling with. That's the hope here, at least, is that we can cover it in a really unique format using the podcast. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Well, another thing that I think about when I think of you, Natalie, is I met you at a conference here in the Dallas area recently, the Creative Educator Conference by Layli and Madi. And you spoke there. And what struck me about you was, one, you're a great speaker, but two, and most of all, that you have this energy of, you bring people along, you're embracing, everyone wanted to talk to you. And then I came up to you, you were just so warm and welcoming and took the time to like have a few minutes where you were really present. You looked me in the eyes. I asked you, maybe you'd like to come on the podcast. And you said, of course. And that felt very, very special energy there. And you've created these successful communities and you're all about community. Even now, when I just asked you about the podcast, you turned it back to, well, what does the community need? It's not about me. And so I'd love for you to share kind of your thoughts on that. How do you see that, building communities, doing all of that, and maybe even tying that into your book, Built to Belong, because it's so, when I think of that title and you, it makes so much sense.
I truly believe that we are wired to live with one another and support one another. And I spent a lot of my early entrepreneurial years, especially those where I was in college, building a photography business on the side while I was going to school, and then graduating and going full-time into that business. I spent a lot of those years really lonely, like deep down, very, very lonely. I might have been surrounded by likes, comments, follows, chatter on the internet, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel the type of deep connection that we need in order to thrive. Because look, community is not just a nice to have. We treat it that way. We often treat it like it's, we'll deal with it when I've got time. I don't have the capacity to invest in a relationship right now. I've just got to focus on me. And while there is some truth to some of that, I also acknowledge that our brains are not wired to thrive in isolation. When we don't have the depth of relationships that we are truly, like down to our neurobiology, wired to need, we start to lose some of the things that we love most about life and we don't even realize it's happening. I actually, in Built to Belong, say we need community in the same way that we need oxygen. Without it, it begins to suffocate us. But the difference is when you take away oxygen, you know very quickly that there's something wrong. With community, it can take a really long time until you get to a point where you are where I was for several years, where you're truly deeply lonely. And so community, in my eyes, it isn't just something joyful and fun and exciting. Although, again, it is those things, but it's not just those things. I really see community as a lifeline. I see community as a transformational force. I see community as power. And I see it as the ability for people to come together and make this world just a little bit better, do the things they couldn't do on their own, right? And that's both in life and in business. I see community being a space where, on a personal level, where I can leave a legacy behind, where I can make a little bit more of an impact. That's something that has always been super important to me. And I know for a lot of business owners that I work with, they talk about legacy as well. They care about the fact that they're building something not just for themselves, but for their kids. They're building something bigger than themselves. And I see community in that same light. So for me, it's understanding, one, that we need community, two, that we're deserving of that love and that belonging, which is a huge part of it. It was a part of my journey. And for so many, I know it is as well. It's one thing to have the people around you. It's another thing to feel deeply connected and embrace and accept the fact that you are worthy of being in that space and you are worthy of being respected and appreciated and loved. And then also, I think it's an opportunity, especially in the entrepreneurial world, to disrupt a status quo that has been far more harmful than it has been helpful. And what I mean by that is competition can be a beautiful thing and it can inspire so much innovation, and it gives us that little boost of adrenaline that we need to kind of get going. And I talk about this in Built to Belong. Like, competition can be powerful. However, we live in a moment in time where competition has sort of escaped the bounds that it's supposed to be held within. It used to be we competed in the marketplace or in the professional workplace. And then the minute we were done competing, we were able to turn it off. I talk about Sinville too long too. I think about tennis or any professional athletic event as an example. I talk about tennis in particular, where there's a moment from a past US Open where Naomi Osaka and Coco Gauff were on the court and they're competing. I mean, they are giving it their all. They are blood, sweat, and tears on that pavement. And everyone was rooting for Coco in that particular match. For folks who aren't aware of the story or tennis or the US Open, she was young. She still is young. But at the time, the underdog, the young one coming up in the space, there was a lot of fanfare for her, even in the audience. I mean, people were cheering for her to win. It was very clear that although she was the underdog, she was the one that people were fighting for. But Naomi won. And at the end of the match, she took a moment to turn the spotlight back on Coco to celebrate her and to celebrate the accomplishments of another woman in that moment when the competition had concluded. In the moment where the score had been settled, people then came first. So it was this idea of, although they were competitors when the game was on, at the end of the day, what mattered most to them was the fact that they were truly community. I think in my world in the business space, it's always been a passion of mine because I acknowledge that many of the ways that we're taught to run businesses don't align with that ideology. It's no, your competition, and that's all you are. And you have to compete and do whatever it takes to win, even if that means stepping on somebody else to make yourself higher and to succeed. And that's just not a mindset that's truthfully helpful at all. It's a mindset that holds people back, that keeps people stuck, that keeps that fear and that isolation moving forward. And so I want to change that. I've always wanted to change that. I want to live in a world where I can look at somebody else that does exactly what I do, and I can genuinely want to see them win. I can fight to help them win. I can share the opportunities that I receive. I can create spaces where, you know, we talked about that. Like you said this early on, there's room, there's space for you. That mindset becoming something that we not only say, but truly believe into our bones, I think is one of the reasons I fight so hard for community, because I've seen what can happen when we do embrace that mindset and we are willing to walk through the fire for one another. We are willing to pick up the pieces when life falls apart for one another. We don't treat it like, oh, but you're my competitor, I can't help you out. We see the human being behind the business. So that's a world I want to live in. And I know that's a world so many people, especially those in my community, want to live in.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. You said that beautifully. There's a couple things I want to dig into that you just said. The first one, I hear this in client conversations as a coach. Post-pandemic, the longing for connection. There's a lot of loneliness. People lost the connection to their friends, to their communities, and whatever that might be. Maybe it was their spin studio community or their Bible study or whatever it might be. And there's a longing for that. And even for some people, they don't even realize it, right? Like you said, the oxygen piece, we realize when we need oxygen, but we maybe don't realize when it's the community. I loved how you described how important it is. And my coach many years ago, when I was feeling some loneliness at work, and I was still in corporate America, she said, it's like you're starving yourself, Lupe. You need connection, and you need to find out how often you need that connection. And I thought, well, maybe once a week. And then what I realized after kind of really paying attention was like, I needed to connect with people every day. And that's why this job is so great for me, because I get to connect with people and help people every single day. I get to have conversations with my clients, and even with the podcast guests, connecting is my top value. And I didn't realize that. I knew I liked people and all that, but it gave me life. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're starving themselves from that connection. So I love how you describe that. The second is that you said for business, right? Competition, maybe even the comparison. You know, I think that applies to anything, life, being a mom and like comparing yourself to other moms or your friends. Like there's so much power. And I think the best things come when we're happy for other people. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there, not just in business as an entrepreneur, but just in life in general.
Yeah, 100%.
You're writing a new book.
I am.
Tell us about that book.
Yeah. So my second book, Gutsy, is all about learning to live with bold, brave, and boundless courage. It is already available for pre-order. It's coming out at the end of the summer. And it is a book that I knew I needed to write, especially in the wake of the last couple of years, because we've seen such a rise of people going out and pursuing their dreams, redefining what their career looks like, whether they're part of the great resignation that we've witnessed over the past couple of years, or, if they're just reevaluating the potential to start a business, or you name it, there's such a multitude of opportunity in these past couple of years, had a realization that the thing that keeps so many people from achieving those goals that they set for themselves isn't failure. It's the fact that they never get started in the first place. It's the fact that they never even bet on themselves enough to see the possibility of that reality come to life. And I began to ask myself, why? Like, why aren't people just doing the darn thing? Why aren't they going after it? What is it that's holding them back? And there are the obvious answers. We know them and see them, and we've experienced many of them, I'm sure, ourselves. But one of the underlying ones that I knew I could help people to address is this fear of what other people think. It is this fear of, well, if I do that, what if I'm not good at it? What if I get judged? What if I fail? Because we're not even afraid of the failure. We're afraid of people witnessing it happen. So I understood very quickly that there needed to be a book that guided people through the understanding of what it means to be gutsy, what their definition of being gutsy looks like. And it's different for each of us. Our dreams and goals are different. Our strengths and weaknesses are different. That definition is going to be unique. But at the end of the day, it's learning to push past all of those fears, those comparison traps that we fall into, all of those, internal dialogues that can hold us back and keep us trapped, and really outline a path for ourselves that is unlike any other. And so I'm very, very excited to share that book with everybody.
I'm excited to read it. What's something that you could share with the audience today that you kind of talk about in the book to get past that fear? Because a lot of people have that fear. So what's something that you could share with the audience that might help them start moving forward?
Absolutely. So there's one big section of the book. We talk a lot about redefining your relationship with failure, the idea of it, how to navigate it. If you're a team leader, for example, how to create psychologically safe spaces, which for anyone who knows about that, Google did a massive research study several years ago to unpack what made a successful team. And they found that it wasn't how intelligent every member of the team was. It didn't matter if you had Rhodes Scholars and MIT grads packed onto a team. That was not what made it successful. It was a team that had psychological safety, a team where people felt like they could take risks and fail and that it would be okay, right? They could show up as themselves, that they were embraced for that. So cultivating that psychological safety, not just with the people that you work with if you are a team lead, but I would argue for yourself. Do you feel safe to fail? Are there narratives in your mind that you have learned since you were young that you repeat to yourself today that are not the truth, that somehow equate any sort of failure to not a failure of initiative, meaning this thing failed, but to a failure of self, meaning I am a failure? Do you believe that failing at something means that it becomes a part of your identity? I give a really specific example in the book where I talk about the fact that it's okay to suck at something. And it sounds silly, but it took me until my 30s, truthfully, to realize I can suck at things. It's okay. If something brings you joy, do it. Knit a sweater no one would ever want to wear. Sing a song at the top of your lungs that is completely out of tune. Just do it if it makes you happy. Write a poem that no one would ever want to recite other than you. Do the things that bring you joy, even if you suck at them. Play and be playful and allow yourself I'll even say, don't even love yourself. Love yourself enough to fail, to suck at things that bring you joy, to be silly, to make mistakes. Because a lot of people never had the freedom to do that. And still, a lot of people do not have necessarily that freedom to do that unless they fight for it or carve out safe spaces within community, which is why I'm so passionate about building communities where you truly belong, where they can embrace those sides of themselves. Because something really powerful happens the moment when we stop seeing failure or failing at even the most small elements of our life as this horrific outcome. And we start seeing it as an inevitable part of the path to success. We start saying, of course I'm going to fail. I can't wait to fail. The faster I fail, the sooner I can actually get to the thing I want to do or learn the thing I need to learn. That mindset shift is transformational because, again, so many people don't even go after their dreams or go after the thing because they're afraid, not because they've actually failed. Because if it was just failure, for many of us, it's a stepping stone, not a conclusion, right? And it can be with a different mindset.
Yes. And I see this come up in client conversation all the time. It's feeling of, I have to figure it out in my head, figure it out, the perfect path, the perfect plan. And we have to do to get the confidence to figure out the path. And there's going to be failing, and there might be rejection, or there might be tears, whatever it might be. But that's how we get to wherever we want to be. And so I agree completely with that.
Yeah. And getting comfortable with rejection. Like you mentioned rejection. I'll be really honest. That was something for me that I struggled with a lot, was the idea of rejection. There's no doubt deeply rooted in some sort of trauma from the depths of my childhood. And I'm sure for many other people, that is also the case. Rejection is sort of one of those core things we struggle with. And it's linked to, how do other people see us? It's also linked to our biology, right? Being rejected from a group or a community meant certain death for a lot of civilizations. You know, ostracism, for example, they say was like the most horrific thing that could happen to a human being. And often, I would argue, still is one of the most horrific things that can happen to a human being. So we run away from it at all costs. So that's one of those areas where it's wired within us to run from any potential rejection. But we have the ability with our conscious awareness and with intentional practice to kind of rewire our minds a little bit and embrace that rejection again as part of the process. Give examples of all of these books that everyone has heard of and just listed how many times they had been rejected before they were picked up by a publisher. And reminding us that what if that person had stopped submitting on the 50th rejection? We wouldn't have this book today. How many rejections are you willing to take for your dreams? And what if you stopping was you stopping right before the door was going to open, right before that next person was going to walk in and acknowledge all the work you had done and see the potential, or a client was going to book that package that you had been hoping somebody would book to give you that moment that you needed to show off your expertise? I could go on and on and on, all of to say, get comfortable with rejection as much as you can, or dare I say, get uncomfortable by being rejected and embracing that it's part of the process.
Yes. Changing careers for me was huge on that. Embracing that I might be rejected, right? Potential clients or whatever it might be. In 2020, launching the podcast and then reaching out to people and either being ghosted or getting a very nice reply that they're not interested in coming on the podcast or whatever. It's been one of the biggest personal development projects for me. And it's brought me so much joy, so much growth. And I've had the opportunity to meet so many incredible people just like you. And so to have conversations like this, it's because I was willing to be rejected. And every time I'm like, okay, I'm going to reach out. It's okay. I can only control what I'm doing. And if they don't respond or they say no, it's okay. It wasn't meant to be. It's brought me so much joy.
I love that.
Anything else that you'd like to share with our audience, specifically around community? If someone's feeling maybe isolated or kind of alone, or like they're craving friendship, they're craving a community, whatever it might be, and connection. Also, they're feeling like, I don't know where to start, or I'm scared. Or what if I went to give a presentation in January on vision boards to high school students? And I ended up actually coaching and talking with all the parents. The students weren't as interested, but the parents were much more excited about planning for their goals. And as I went around the room talking to all of the parents, there was one mom who I thought at first wasn't very interested in the presentation. She didn't smile much. She was kind of not talking, not participating. And I thought maybe she just didn't like the presentation. But I went to go talk to her and she said, I'm just so shy. It just makes me so uncomfortable. And I said, have you met the other mom that's like right across, literally 2 chairs over diagonally from her? And she said, no, but actually both our sons are in soccer or football, I can't remember, together. And for a long time, I have never actually met her. And she'd been sitting there for 45 minutes and she hadn't made the connection. And I said, would you be okay if I introduce you to her? And she said, yeah, I would love that. And so I said, I can't remember her name. I want to introduce you to her because she just mentioned that your sons are together and she'd love to connect. And then I kind of pulled her aside later and I said, hey, she's a little bit shy. And this mom was very outgoing. I said, do you think? She's like, yeah, definitely. And at the end of the night, she invited her to participate on a committee with her. She was just so excited about it. And if that's the only thing that anyone walked away with from that presentation, it was a success. It made me feel so good that someone who felt disconnected would have connected with another mom. So I say that because I know there's people out there. There's someone listening who wants that, who craves that. What would you say? That was a very long-winded story.
I love that story. Oh, well, Listen, if someone out there is listening and you feel disconnected or lonely or afraid of connection in this moment, like if you're the parent or the person that's often in the crowd going, please don't call on me, please don't call on me, or even debates walking in the room, first, I just want to say, you're not alone. I need you to know that. I also need you to know that you're not broken, that there's nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with being shy. There is nothing wrong with guarding your heart because you've experienced pain in the past. There is nothing wrong with being intentional about who you allow into your life and the relationships that you bring into your life. I think that it can be easy when that is your default or when that has become misconstrued by the world as a negative. Like I always think all the time, for a long time, I think left-handed folks, this is just, I think my sister's left-handed, I'm right-handed. It was looked upon as like, oh, you should use your right hand. And so, you know, folks who were left-handed were constantly feeling as though something was wrong with them because they had a left dominant hand. It's a very simple example, but all I mean by it is if you're more introverted, if you're more shy, we need you. The world needs you. I mean, thank goodness not everybody's an extrovert, right? Like, thank goodness not everyone is the loudest, most outgoing one in the room. It is the diversity and our uniqueness that really powers this world for the better, that powers communities for the better. So that's the first thing I need you to know. Nothing wrong with you. You're not broken if you're shy. In many ways, actually, frankly, makes you an extraordinary leader. Some of the best leaders I've ever worked with are the ones who really genuinely can listen. They've spent their lives able to listen to what other people have to say, and they lead from a place of being informed with that foundation rather than just talking to hear themselves speak. So please know you are needed, you are worthy, you are enough. The second thing I would say is it doesn't have to happen overnight. Building community, building connection, building relationships, it's not something that will just instantly happen, right? These are sort of slow processes by design. And so I always say to people, start with what you have, start where you are, and start one at a time. So if you are someone that has the ability to attend a meetup in person or a seminar or something, go. But if you can't, that is also okay. Start with what you have access to. If that is social media, if that is a virtual event, if that is whatever it looks like in this season for you, start with where you are, with what you have, and that includes the connections that you have. Oftentimes, we feel far more empowered to engage and to meet others when we have one friend or buddy that goes with us. So sometimes I'll even say, there's somewhere that you want to go, but you feel afraid to do it. Don't do it alone. Bring somebody with you, even if that person has nothing to do with the event. With all of the Rising Tide meetups that I've been to over the years, I cannot tell you how many times I've had somebody come in through the door and say, oh, I brought my friend so-and-so. They're not a business owner, but I dragged them here with me because I don't know anyone here and we're going to get dinner afterwards. It's normal. It's okay. Do it. If that helps you to get the courage to walk through the door and not feel alone, bring somebody with you and swap vice versa for somebody else. Another thing that I often encourage is if you do have one connection, even if it's only one connection. So, you know, one other parent at the school, you have one other friend that does what you do if you're in a particular industry, or one colleague at work that you really admire and hit it off with in the lunchroom from time to time. Start there and be open and vulnerable about your desire to become more connected. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, I've loved moments where someone has said to me, hey, you know, I've really been meaning to come out to these meetups for years now. And I just haven't been able to for so many reasons, but most of them are excuses. Literally, like, can you just hold me accountable to come to the next one? I really want to stay involved. Or, you know, if you say to a friend, look, I really want to make more friends at work. I feel like I've been here for 6 months and I still don't know everybody. Could you introduce me to just some of your favorite folks around the office? Because we really hit it off. And I feel like if they're your friend, they probably would also be my friend, right? Or the same in an industry. You name it. It's as simple as being vulnerable enough for that 30 seconds, just 30 seconds of vulnerability. It's all it takes to say, hey, I'm looking to become more connected in this moment. Or I really need to find more friends that do X, Y, Z. Especially if you have a friend who's an outgoing extrovert, they're going to perk up. They're going to perk up and suddenly they are going to feel deeply useful. And that, especially for someone that's a natural connector, is like fuel to a fire. Whenever someone says to me, hey, can you introduce me to someone that does XYZ? I'm immediately like, yes, I can. And it's so exciting to me. And even hearing you retell that story, it's very clear that you're one of those, like a very natural connector. You want to see people feeling as though they belong, checking in with people who you worry like, oh, are they engaged? Is something wrong? Can I help? Those natural kind of, I like to think of it as like, that's a personality type, those natural connector personality types give them a task. Like, hey, introduce me to some of your friends. Hey, next time you go to a networking event, can you tell me so I can come with you? If there's a happy hour event in town, I need to meet new people. I just moved here. Be open about what you need. And that is something that a lot of us have to learn as we are growing into adulthood and growing into the people that we're becoming. A lot of us have been taught for a lot of our lives that we can't ask for what we need. And so something as simple as that, like that's a really good first step. Ask for what you need. Start with where you are. Start with the connections that you do have. Have the willingness to be vulnerable even for 30 seconds. And then you can shut the gates again. Okay. But like 30 seconds, just give yourself that. You owe yourself that. You deserve that, right? You deserve that. It doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of this isn't. I actually felt that way when I wrote Built to Belong. So many times I would think, is this just too simple of advice? Like it feels so simple. And yet I realized, actually recently, I was rereading one of the chapters of the book and I was like, nope, absolutely not. It might be simple, but it is so, so, so needed in the chaos that we can find ourselves in where it feels hopeless or we feel overwhelmed, or it's really simple. Go back to basics and don't be afraid to do all of what we just talked about.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you. Thank you. I know that's going to serve someone listening. Where can people find you? Where can people buy your books? Where can people learn more about you? Tell us all the things.
All the things. Okay. So books are everywhere that books are sold. I always say, if wherever you go to get your book, Built to Belong and Gutsy are available. And I've done the audiobooks as well. So if you're an audiobook listener and you prefer audio
with your
content,
incredible voice,
I narrate them. Yes. So you can go and access them there. And then I exist on the internet in all places. Just search for me at Natalie Franke, wherever you generally tune in. I do spend a disproportionate amount of time on Instagram and on TikTok. So if you're on either of those platforms, definitely come find me. But it's just been such an honor to be here with you. And thank you again so much for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you.